Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Larry, and I'm an alcoholic. Is the volume okay, Glenn? And I want to thank you guys for going out on the limb and having me come out again, see you, and congratulate our new people, and Patty and everybody, and Sasha and stuff. And I'm glad to be with you. Um, my sponsor tells me that I'm living proof that a man can stay sober for a little over 40 years and not amount to a damn thing, really. He says, I'm not much, but I'm all I think about. Um, and I'm glad to be with you. And I really, I hope I never forget what it's like to be new. I hope I never forget what it's like to finally get your 30-day chip and your 90-day chip and stuff like that. And thank God for Alcoholics Anonymous, where our survival rests on us talking to new people and carrying the message instead of just in a room waiting for people to do something for you. And it makes me glad to be with you guys. I've got a guy that I sponsor right now who's got his 90-day chip coming in today. And boy, this guy is just lit, you know. And I remember what it was like on that first week and all the paranoia and the fears. And he'd been around the rooms before and stuff like that. And to see that guy just make that slight little shift, you know, it it makes me glad that I can sit in a home group and see that happening. And so I'm really glad to be here. And it seems like to me that the longer I stay sober, the more important that becomes is to never forget from whence I came. And it's so funny because in our book Alcoholics Anonymous, it talks about it's easy to let up on a spiritual way of life. And they're not talking just about 10 years or 15 years, but in any point in my sobriety, all it takes for me is to get off this little routine that I'm on and start running the show again. And before you know it, my material possessions become more important than my primary purpose here, you know. And I'm glad I'm with you guys. Uh, you know, the bottom line is after I got done with a fifth step with my sponsor, I realized that you know, my life is my fault. Uh, in that book, Alcoholics Anonymous, it talked about taking the word blame out of your vocabulary. And for anybody like me, that left me speechless. You take the word blame out, there's not a whole lot to talk about when you're like me, because I was sure that I had this thing dialed in, that it was all kinds of reasons but my own. And God, I come from great people, born in Detroit, and, put in a little foster home and in an orphanage for a while. And mom and dad had some trouble, but after a couple of years, they got together and they gave it, another countless vain attempt. And they moved out to California and got settled in. And then they eventually came back and got me, and we started living out here. And boy, I tell you, uh, my mom and dad, they worked so hard just to make sure that me and my sisters would never have to want for anything, you know. And for some reason, I have this sense of entitlement that because I show up and sit someplace, I deserve everything that everybody has to earn, you know. And thank God they wouldn't have any part of that. My mom's a little Scandinavian lady, and she liked diet pills, so she was always running around the house around midnight. And sorting out nuts and bolts in the garage all night or raking the neighbor's yard. And she loved those diet pills, loved eating that speed. And she used to eat that speed and make Afghans all day, and all through the house, everything had fresh Afghans on it all the time. The couches had Afghans, the chairs had Afghans. My dad's golf clubs had little poodle heads she worked, and no matter what time you got up, she was up knitting, and just a great lady. And some of you know, when you eat a lot of that speed, you have a lot of diet, you have a lot of hobbies. And one of her favorite hobbies was to do these jigsaw puzzles, and they weren't the little 1,000 pieces or the 5,000 pieces. She did the 1,000,000 pieces of the Mojave Desert, and she would run off to the drugstore and get her a carton of those Raleigh cigarettes that she used to smoke. And on the back of each pack of cigarette, they had a coupon. And if you saved these coupons, they had a catalog and you could buy stuff. And she would save these coupons and buy more yarn. It was a hideous cycle she was, And boy, she used to go to the drugstore and get that stinky peroxide she used to put on her hair and get her one and only muumuu on that she had for 50 years and squeeze herself in that little breakfast nook and start putting together this puzzle. And Jesus, if she got a piece that didn't fit, well, she had a big pair of toenail clippers that she just snipped that son of a gun and wedge it right in there. There was no giving up for Betty. She's going to put this thing together, And I loved hanging around my mom. I did. She was outgoing. She had a great sense of humor, and people in the neighborhood liked her, And I never want to forget. She had a face kind of like that old actress Kim Novak. She was a great, great looking lady and had a great little personality and stuff like that. And I never want to forget when I was 30 years old and I finally got to Alcoholics Anonymous, for which I hope and pray is my last time, what I did to that little lady. How I had whittled that little lady down to a 95-pound nervous wreck, where she was glued in front of her kitchen window all day long, just staring out that kitchen window, smoking those Raleighs, seeing that cop car go by and wondering if it's me in the back, seeing the Daily Breeze newspaper come sliding underneath the door and wondering if that's my obituary in the back of that paper, staying there all night in front of that window, wondering if that figure walking down the street, is that my son coming home? I never want to forget that. And yet I'm out there with that attitude that my drinking ain't bothering anybody. I never want to forget what it was like to be 18 years old and be put away for a small period. And when I come out on a Monday, the bus lets me off and I'm supposed to go to the courthouse and take care of some probation stuff. And I get off that bus and I don't go to the courthouse. I make a left turn and I go back into the neighborhood. And it's a Monday and I come out on a Thursday. And I don't show up at the courthouse or home. No, I show up at my mom's place of business at 8 o'clock in the morning in the rain, cleaning people's houses on the weekends, and she's working in a dry cleaner. And I show up at her place of business, and I'm about 50 yards from the front of her store window. And I'm in the parking lot, and I'm hiding behind a car with that rain coming down. And I look at myself, and I've got my bare feet and my dirt and my filth and my, as Wino Joe used to call it, the habiliments of despair. And I'm standing there in that rain in my bare feet, and I've only got one idea. I'm staring at that little window of her dry cleaners thinking, she better have a buck. And I started walking that 50 yards to my mom as if it was yesterday, walking through that rain with my filth and my mud and my disgust. And I open up that store door and that brass bell hits that glass window and my mom turns around and makes an oh so familiar sound. She goes, oh my God, where have you been? And she goes to the cash register and she goes to her little wallet And she gets out a little wallet, and there's a picture of me that falls out when I'm 9 years old, and I'm on this Little League team. And it's a picture of me on this Little League team. It would be the only decent picture that she ever has of me until I meet you guys. And then she breaks out her wallet and peels off $1 and $2 and $3. And I run by her and I grab that money and I run off to Long Beach where I'm going to die. Now, the thing that brings it home to me this afternoon with you fine folks in Tennessee is you take this same man, new in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I need to ask you something. How come when my life depends on it? If you were to put a secretary of a meeting that same distance as me and my mom in that parking lot, how come when my life depends on it, I can't walk that same distance and ask the person for a job in a meeting that's going to save my life, but I can walk that distance and use my mom and folks like her time and time and time. And I'm here to share with you, if you're new, that if my alcoholism doesn't kill me, my selfishness and my self-centeredness will, make no mistake about that, which is why it's necessary for a clown like me to be close to and active in a program called Alcoholics Anonymous. And if I can get with you folks in that book and find that thing that keeps me from serving you, I will have found a key to life. There's a miracle here. Things happen here to people like myself who come here to get and finally start doing something for the thing they want so much from. And when I started finding ways to serve you in my home group in whatever way I can, my life began to take a shift that's never happened to me before. And if I can find that thing that keeps me from serving you, I will have found a key to life. Because once that started in my life, I couldn't keep it from bleeding in every area of my life. There's a miracle here. And something happens to the alcoholic of my type who takes that inspiration that he feels in these rooms and he begins to take it into his home and to his wife and to his children. And he brings it into the work life where it's not just something that you do for an hour and a half. If you're new, I heard a man early on in my sobriety that became my sponsor. And at about a year and a half sober, he told me the words that'll save my life. He says, today when I think of sobriety, the idea of drinking and doing drugs doesn't even enter my mind. Today when I think of sobriety, I think about the way I live. And that's the question that I had to pose to myself, was not only did I want to get off that hamster cage of life and get sober, but I needed a brand new way of life, and I didn't know how to go about it because I kept sobering up, and I'm in that same life that got me there, and I didn't know how to get out of that living hell, where the life you're living is the one that's killing you, and you can't get off that merry-go-round. And that's the question I had to ask myself was, how would you like a brand new way of life for the life you're living, just tickling the snot right out of you, you know? I needed a brand new way of life. And Alcoholics Anonymous was about to present that with me. Now, my dad was a happy drunk. My dad was a happy singing the blues, Nat King Cole, Bobby Darin drunk. But he was a refinery worker, World War II vet, Navy man. His ship got sunk in World War II in Midway, lost all of his high school buddies. He had a hell of a life. Grew up in the ghettos of Detroit. Father died when he was 13, choked on his tongue. His mother hung herself in a Detroit jail. She was a drunken whore. And his only dream was to marry my mom and take her to California. And he was a happy drunk. He was a window climbing alkie is what he was. He used to get drunk and sneak into his own home. It was amazing. thing, standing on that gas meter all night, pounding on that window, hoping that it's his own home, getting ready to make that magic dive. And he snuck in there one night, and that old refinery boot came down on my chest, and I grabbed that boot and I said, "Hey, Pop," I said, "why don't you have Mom make you a set of keys? My God, she's up anyway. I can hear her vacuuming now. And me and my dad were pretty close until I got about 10 years old and realized that all the noise and all the violence that I was hearing in that house, I couldn't stand the fact that I couldn't stop it. Hearing the things that are going on with Mom and Dad and stuff like that, and I felt so inadequate and so guilty that I wasn't able to stop it, and that I didn't trust these people that I loved. They were telling me to do things, yet they weren't doing it, which made Alcoholics Anonymous stand out in my life, because not only were you folks giving me suggestions, I could see you taking your own advice into your homes and work and play. You led by example. And that confused me as a kid. And I started running away from home, back and forth, back and forth. And well, somewhere around the age of 11 years old, there was about 4 of us. And we wound up in a garage and we started passing around a bottle of Four Rose whiskey. And Jesus, I never threw up so much my entire life, throwing up stuff I ate when I was 6 months old. I never laughed so hard my entire life, and that evening at 11 years old, I kissed my first Latin woman with my aunt. I went after my Auntie Della and, made my uncle a little edgy, and oh my God, I had the night that I dreamt about, man, was that drunk. Now, I didn't head out to Skid Row the next day and lose my paper out and come to the Alano Club, but I never forgot that evening, because when you're a loser like me and you're a nobody and you hear it enough, you become it. What happened to me that evening is that for the first time in my life, this little nobody became somebody. And it dawned on me I would rather be a part-time somebody than an all-time nobody. And I know just what made the trick. It was that Four Rose whiskey. And, I become preoccupied and just started leaning that way. And like I said, I wasn't pounding the bars at 11 and 12, but I just started going that way. At the age of 12, I was washing some guy's car. And he gave me the keys to his car, and he told me when I'm done washing it, pull it into the driveway. And me and my little buddy, Johnny, we were, actually, it was a guy named Danny Russell. He was from Frog Jump, Tennessee. And me and Danny were washing that thing, and we started drinking some of his dad's port wine. And, Danny says, we don't need to dry this thing. Why don't we just drive it around the block and dry it? And I said, well, it sounds like a good idea to me. So I hopped in the car, and I couldn't even see over the steering wheel, and we're driving that thing. And before you know it, man, I hit about 2 parked cars and pulled over to the side of the street and had my head on the steering wheel. And within minutes, there's the police. And I got my first drunken driving, and I couldn't drive until there was another person with a license in my car till I was 32 years old, 2 years sober in AA. And my life started turning that way, and by the time I got to high school, a freshman in high school, kids are going to their lockers to get their books and pencils. And I'm going to my lockers to take a little snort of some PM bourbon or something like that, and or some of my dad's wine, or maybe take some barbiturates. And, I started dating this little Mexican girl, and she had some brothers, and they liked cars, and I love cars to this day. And we didn't have those Dodge trucks like you guys have out in Tennessee, where you have these 9-foot tires and you drive over each other's houses on the weekend and stuff, But I did have a 62 Chevy, just dropped right down to the ground. had my hair slicked back and my black khaki pants and my pants that came up to here and my white t-shirts and my head all puffed up and combed back. And car was lowered down to the ground. And we'd drive around drinking that wine and listening to the Four Tops and the Temptations and the OJs and Marvin Gaye. And God, I loved it, man. It wasn't too long ago. I was in my plumbing truck and the Four Tops came on. I just started sinking in my damn truck. I loved it. I had a little Mexican girl named Lupe, and she used to curl her hair with soup cans, and the noodles were stuck in there. And, and we'd drive around and drink that cheap wine and wondering what the hell you were staring at. Her girlfriends were telling her that men who were well endowed had big feet. So I went out and bought me a pair of 15-inch shoes. And, my wife tripped over my foot this morning and I felt proud. And I loved it, man. And, one more time, I became somebody, I was no longer that little goofy kid down the street or Betty and Bob's little boy. I became Lawrence of Torrance, for God's sake, and I started hanging around these guys and these gangs, and we started doing little robberies and stuff like that. And I knew me and Pooch and Loopy were going to bounce off into the sunset. And I loved it. I found my people and I found my niche, and drinking was the main part of it. And around 1969, folks are going different places, and some of them are going to Vietnam, and some of them going to San Francisco and stuff. And I'm in Gardena, Los Angeles, California, wondering what I'm going to do with my life. At the age of about 18, I said, well, I'm going to go back to Detroit and find my roots. So I grabbed my dope dealer and we headed out to Detroit, wound up in Phoenix, Arizona, over there off of North Central and Roosevelt at the Apache Hotel. It's a beautiful place, the Apache. Everybody has a bathroom. It's down the hall. Everybody has a TV. It's in the lobby. $13 a night. And, I'm running out of dough. I'm afraid to leave the place in the morning. I'm afraid to be by myself at night. So I find this little watering hole a couple blocks down called the Wagon Wheel Bar. It's a beautiful place. It has no windows, just a curtain blowing through the doorway, And I go in there and I meet a guy named Ernie. And Ernie was the answer man. Every bar has an Ernie. Every bar has got an Ernie that no matter what your problem is, no matter what your dilemma, he's got the answer in the trunk of his car, And I told Ernie my dilemma, and he said, well, you need to get a job. He says, come back here in the morning and I'll put you to work. And so I showed up in the morning and Ernie introduced me to this plumber. And I've never plumbed a thing in my life. I mean, the closest to plumbing I've ever gotten was hugging that toilet and throwing up. That was all the plumbing I ever did, And so he introduces me to this plumber, and he takes me out to a place called Tempe Mesa, Arizona, and he sticks me underneath the house. And I'm excited already, because if there's anything that excites me is being in your home. I don't care where it's at. I could be in the attic. I could be in the basement. I love people's houses and the things in it. And he takes me out to this house and he sticks me underneath it. I'm underneath this house and he gives me a transistor radio. I've got a pint of PM bourbon and he sticks his head under there and he says, okay, champ. He says, all I want you to do is hang copper. That's all I need you to do under there is hang this copper. And in 9 hours, I'll come get you. And he leaves me, and I'm underneath this house. I'm kind of excited because it's I've never been underneath this house, and you never know what you're going to find under there, And I start crawling around there, and sure enough, man, I'm not under there for 10 minutes, and I find this stray cat. And I'm going, oh my God, this is great. And I'm all excited because, I'm thinking, oh my God, I've got a transistor, I've got a pint of whiskey, I've got a pet. And I'm thinking, this is the closest to normal living that I've ever gotten until I met you guys, And I get all excited. I got this little cat, and I keep drinking that hot bourbon because you got to get all that dirt out of your throat. And boy, it pops up and warms the back of your ears and lightens up your back of your neck. And you take another snort, and before you know it, man, I'm smashed, and I'm busting up through the lady's floor and I'm robbing her of her jewelry and some of her money, and after about 9 hours, I pass out, and the boss comes and he's dragging me out from underneath the house. And here comes the stray cat with about 4 necklaces on, And he puts me in jail for 6 months, and I get out of there, go back to the wagon wheel. And Ernie looks at me and he says, "Where you been?" And I told him, he says, "Well," he says, "I've had an idea." He says, "This is what we're going to do." He says, "Not too far from here's a horse track." He says, "We're going to get you down to 95 pounds. You're going to be a jockey." And I thought, damn, this is great, man. I'll start working out, and, pushing weights. He goes, "Well, I don't know about that." He said, "But I need you to take this stuff. I got this stuff in this bag." And he says, "I need you to take this stuff. And after about 2 months, we'll go weigh you in, because I'm pretty sure you'll be down to 95 pounds. And he says, we'll go to the horse track and get our colors. I'll start taking this stuff." And he leaves me in my little hotel room with this bag of stuff that I've never had before. I've just been minding my own business and drinking cheap wine and doing heroin and not bothering anybody. He leaves me with this bag of speed, and I've never had this stuff before, And he comes back not 2 months later, but 2 weeks later. He knocks on that door and opens it up, and I'm standing there, and he goes, "Oh, my God." He says, "You couldn't have possibly taken all this." And I go, "Yeah, you can put a saddle on me and ride my ass around here, Ernie." I've been stuck in that little room chasing a fly around my room and looking out the window going, "What's that? What's that? What's that?" Or I'm hiding underneath my bed for however long, because these black and white flashes are torturing me and they're scaring me. And it's the sun going up and down, And he says, "My God," he says, "you couldn't have possibly taken it." Well, I did, And he takes that stuff, and I go back to the wagon wheel, and I start working for this other plumber, and I start working for this guy for about 2 hours. And I find out that he's younger than me. And I've got my Detroit pride. I ain't working for no kid. So I did what any honorable man would do. I faked a knee injury, and they took me to the Phoenix hospital, and the doctor writes me a prescription for Percodan. And then he leaves my room, and he leaves a cardboard box full of blank prescription pads he wanted me to have. Right? So I grabbed that box, man, and I'm running down the street, and I duck into the old wagon wheel bar, and Ernie sees these things, and he gets, "Oh, my God, this is great." And he calls this guy in Mesa, Arizona, and we start writing prescriptions and selling them. We had a little PDR book, and we start writing prescriptions for everything. My God, we're writing prescriptions for Seconal and Tuinal and Nebutol, and you name it all. We wrote it all, and damn near took it all, and after about, 9 months, they caught up with me, and when you're loaded on cheap whiskey and tequila and barbiturates, there's no freeway chase on Channel 12. There he goes down the, there's none of that going on. There's no helicopter, he was on foot. The cop was on foot, just walking by my window, pounding on it, telling me to roll the window down. Hey, and I looked at this guy, and I'm going, "My God, can he run?" And boy, they threw me out of that car and put me in jail for another year. And I get out of there, and they send me back to California. And in 1974, I'm in California, and my probation officer gives me a voucher for a boarding house. And it's just a hallway with 5 bedrooms. And everybody's got a little room. Everybody's got a little bed. And at this time in my life, people are saying that familiar statement, "You need some goals in your life. What are you going to do when you grow up? I mean, do you have any idea where you're going, And at this time in my life, I'm in this boarding house. And every now and then I would look out that little window, and I would see a hotel across the street. And they would have this big sign on there that says, "Rooms for rent with hot plate." And I thought, one of these days, I'm going to get it together and get me one of those rooms. And that was my goal. And they put me on Antabuse. And for the first time in my life since I was 13, they got me on this Antabuse. They didn't talk about Alcoholics Anonymous. They didn't talk about psychology or nothing. They stuck me on this Antabuse. And for the first time in my life since I'm about 13, I haven't drank for 90 days. And my probation officer gives me a job interview voucher to work at this refinery, be a part-time janitor at midnight. And I took the bus down to there. And, when you're taking a bus, you're either 3 hours early or 3 hours late. There's none of this, I'll be right there, And I'm about 3 or 4 hours early, and I'm walking through this little town. And I get into this Little League field, and I'm in this dugout, and I start crying like a baby, and I start laughing like a clown. And this goes on for a couple hours. And that paranoia that used to follow me when I would ever be coming off a drunk, and the hallucinations, they start sticking with me. I haven't drank for 3 months. I start wandering this little field, and I become what they call kind of, catatonic or whatever. And people see me wandering around, and they call the paramedics. And they come and get me. And in 1974, I'm on a gurney with an arm and a leg tied down, and the doctor comes up to me to the side of the bed, and he said, "Son, it seems to be that the way you've been living, that maybe you need to go to a mental facility where they can observe you and find out what's going on with you, kid." And so they sent me to a mental facility where they were going to observe me for 30 or 60 days, and a year later they let me out, totally observed. And they gave me certain medications to take. And in 1975, I got out of there, and I started wandering the streets of Long Beach and Los Angeles, in and out of life. And in 1975, they find me in Olvera Street, downtown Los Angeles, across the street from Skid Row at a Chevron gas station. And I'm on a pile of tires. And I'm not over there vaping or anything. I'm just getting some rest, because at this time in my life, there isn't a thing that you don't do for a shot of alcohol. And I'm going from city to city, wandering around, countless vain attempts, trying to get it together, trying to do that thing that, try to not drink, and get a job and get a little room and try to do this. And at this time in my life, it seems that everybody that I'm meeting are all interested in doing one thing. And whether they be people, and these are all well-meaning people, people of the cloth and people of the law and people of medicine and people of psychology, all these people are just driven to do one thing for me: separate me from alcohol. They were all sure that if I stopped drinking, everything would be all right. And the problem with them is that they weren't alcoholic. And little did they know that the very thing that they were trying to get me to do was the very thing that was driving me nuts: sobriety. That I sit in these rooms and I hear people say, "I'm not drinking and everything's wonderful." And I'm sitting in these little rooms going, "I'm not drinking and I'm absolutely mad." And it seemed like sobriety drove me to drink time and time and time again. And that's because the answer to sobriety isn't just not drinking. That the answer to sobriety for people like me is not the alpha and the omega. That's just the starting place in Alcoholics Anonymous to incorporate this brand new way of life. And the difference that was made, the thing that makes Alcoholics Anonymous so precious to me, is not about how much they knew, and not about what they promised me, not about what they guaranteed me. It is that people were talking to me who suffered like I did. They knew what it was like to stop drinking, and the very things that were driving you nuts and driving you to drink, they knew what that was like, to wake up to the hideous four horsemen. They knew that. And yet they told me they never once talked about my drinking. They talked about their drinking. And I would sit there and just go, my God, that guy's telling my story. And in 1975, they arrested me on public nuisance, out-of-state forgeries, a violation of probation, and sentenced me to 3.5 years in the state penitentiary. And then they sent me up to Los Angeles Wayside, where you wait for your trial date. And after about 3 months, they put about 50 of us in a black and white bus and took us to the South Bay Courthouse in Torrance, California, where I'm going to be sentenced. And they take us into this room about the size of a basketball court in a high school, holding tank. And all these guys that I'm chained with, one by one, the judge is calling them out, and they're not coming back. And I'm going, oh my God, I wonder where they're going. And at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I was the only guy left. I was on a concrete floor with a Vons bag and no hope, wondering where they're going to send me now, because they're always sending me someplace. And at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, there was a Scottish man with a patch standing outside this jail door. And the sheriff rolled open that door, and there's this Scottish man with a patch. And he's clean and he's sharp, just like you folks are this afternoon. And he's got this patch on, and he looks into that jail, and he goes, "Aye, lad." He goes, "Are you Larry Thomas?" And I go, "Yes, sir, I am." He goes, "Oh, that's great. Great." He says, "Come with me, son. We're going to AA." And I thought, AA? What's AA? I've heard of OR and PO, but what's AA? And, who's the Scottish pirate all of a sudden? I've been hallucinating so much, I don't know if he's real, And that man took me to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was ready for a long ride up north and maybe some lunch, right? He takes me to a 15-minute car ride to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Rolls up to this dingy, stinking, rotten, filthy Torrance Lomita Alano Club. Now, I'd never heard that word before in my life, Alano. What's an Alano? Is it like an elk or a moose? Watch for crossing Alanos, you know what I mean? And he pulled up to this Alano Club, and there's all these Alanos, and it's just a clubhouse where they have meetings, and all these people are walking around, and he starts introducing me to all these goofy people, Indian Genie, and Captain Bob, and Tennessee Bill, and Singing Sam, and Serenity Sam, and Bicycle Ray, and Santa Claus Ray, and Dancing Pete, and Whistling Butt. Oh my God, I just left a bunch of people like this, right? Little Moose was 120 years old. She comes running after me. She goes, "Hi, honey, my name is Moose, and I'm expecting a miracle." I said, "I bet you are." I said, "I'm not it, And then this big transvestite starts circling me like a helicopter in Long Beach, and he comes walking up to me in his moo-moo, and he says, "Hi." He says, "I can't wait to take you to our candlelight meeting." I said, "I don't think so, big guy, not till I get my year." And I said to Alex, I said, "My God, that guy's got big feet, And, and I thought, my God, if that's AA, I don't want any part of it. And from 1975 to 1982, I visited the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't AA. I did what I've done my entire life since I was 13. Whether it be a church or a clinic or a ward in a hospital, I did what I did my entire life. When I came to the rooms of AA, I sat in a room waiting for you to do something for me. I've had my hand out my entire life. I'm a something for nothing guy. And that was the attitude I had, waiting for you to do something for me. And I would sit in these rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, get physically sober and mentally ill. And the obsession to drink would never leave me because I never did anything to remove it. And year after year after year after year, every time I called Alcoholics Anonymous, somebody would come and get me, and they were always clean and they were sharp, which is why I'm privileged to wear a tie with you folks right now. Not because I'm anybody special, but because you guys taught me something that I never learned before in my life, and that was finally showing respect. I'm used to wanting it, and the least thing I can do is that. And every time I called Alcoholics Anonymous, you folks would come and get me. And in 1982, I'm at a little mission in downtown Wilmington, California. I just got kicked out of this mission where they let you in to sing for your beans, and you sing songs of Jesus, and then they feed you and they give you a cot for the night. And they kicked me out after about a day or two. I'm in the alley with the little towel wrapped around me and stuff like that. And I started thinking about maybe I better call AA again. And I panhandled some money, and I called this guy that I've been getting all these years. And I panhandled some money, and I called Alcoholics Anonymous, and I get this bald-headed carpenter, Don, Montana cowboy. And I call him, and I said, "Hey, Don, this is Larry. I'm ready to come back to AA. Will you come and get me?" And he told me the most profound thing I've ever heard in my life. He said, "You know where we are. You know what we got." He said, "Why don't you get your rusty ass down here yourself? I'm tired of chasing after you." And he hung up. And I thought, my God, whatever happened to that AA love? Well, I just heard it. And for the first time in my life, it was up to me to come to you. And man, was I mad at that guy. And I started walking those streets, and I ran by a Woolworth window, and I looked at myself in this window. And I hadn't been big on looking at myself at this time in my life. I'm trying to scar myself and disfigure myself and cut myself with razors and stuff. And I caught eyes with the thing, and I looked at myself in this reflection of this window. And I thought about the little picture that fell out of my mom's wallet. I thought about whatever happened to that kid. Whatever happened to that kid that could run like a deer, who had little friends all over? Whatever happened to that kid who wanted to be a carpenter when he grew up and stuff? Whatever happened to that kid? Whatever happened to those dreams? And it dawned on me that I never had any dreams. Because the moment that I would be inspired to do something, I would talk myself out of it, because what's the use? You don't have a chance in this world, Larry. And it dawned on me at this time, and I came to believe after looking in that mirror. And I didn't come to believe in God or the book or anything like it. But I came to believe in the hopelessness and the futility of my life with me running it. That at 30 years old, I'd given it my best shot. I've tried everything that I could. And the best that I could do at 30 years old is wind up in an alley from a mission with a rug wrapped around me, wondering what to do next, haunted by this alcohol and this god-awful past. Boy, if I could just get rid of my past, if I could just get rid of those regrets and those nightmares and those things that hound me, and then you guys would just nail me when I would sit in your meetings, and you would say stuff like, "Your past is your greatest asset. You won't regret it, Larry." And I'm thinking, what are these crazy people talking about? And it took me a while in Alcoholics Anonymous to discover why you said that. Just like this little kid that I'm sponsoring who got 90 days. What is the thing that binds us? It isn't how much whiskey we drank. It's those insane little secrets, those same things that drive us nuts. The miracle of identification. And if you're new in Alcoholics Anonymous and you've got some little nightmares and some little secrets in your head that make you feel different, find somebody in these meetings that you can talk to. Tell them about those little nuggets that keep you up at night. Tell somebody, and I guarantee you, if you're new, that whatever this little thing is, you will not shock the people in AA. If it hasn't been done by the people in the first 2 rows of this gallery, it just hasn't been thought of yet. You will not shock the people in AA. You want to shock the people in AA? Help us set up the meeting. That'll shock us, you know. And I called that guy an alcoholic, and I came to believe that day, and I came to believe that it was hopeless with me trying to do anything with my life. And I did the thing that I never wanted to do. I walked that 10 miles with my poopy pants and no hope because I had to talk to that carpenter. Number one, I was mad at him because he hung up. And I walked that 10 miles with no hope, and I got to that little clubhouse where they had those meetings. And I was DTing, and I was shaking, and I was alone. And a couple by the name of Frank and Lucille started walking me and feeding me honey and orange juice, giving me buttermilk, walking me and holding me when I was shaking and stuff. And they sat with me for several hours until Don finally got there. And there was that bald-headed carpenter, and I couldn't wait to light into him. And he looked at me, and he gave me this. And I said, yeah, waved to me. Am I good? And I walked over to him, and I said these things to this man. I don't know what to do with my life. I said, would you be my sponsor? And that guy lit up like a chandelier for about 5 seconds, and then he lit into me for 20 minutes. And under no certain terms is he going to put up with my nonsense. He says, I'll sponsor you under one condition. You make the effort, I'll make the effort. If you don't make the effort, Larry, lose my number. I've got guys who want to do this thing. And I fell in love with him. Where are you going to go? And I followed that guy like a tick on a hound dog's ass, man. And I loved him. And I got busy in Alcoholics Anonymous, doing the uncomfortable to get comfortable. And I tell you what, if you're new in Alcoholics Anonymous, somewhere in this book, it talks about our selfishness and self-centeredness. We must get rid of it or it kills us. And God makes that possible. And then he talks about finding a power greater than yourself. Who needs a power greater than yourself when you got whiskey? I needed help with this thing, and I needed to start doing what you folks were telling me to do to try to tap into a power. And eventually, I did what that book told me to do. It says, when we sincerely took a position, I hadn't sincerely done anything in my life but try to kill myself. And it says, when we sincerely take a position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. And I did what that did. I finally tried to come up with this power greater than myself. And the only thing that I could connect that was a power greater than myself was that every time I was around you, every time I was around you, I felt safe. And I thought, man, maybe that's it. I'm going to use AA as my power. And I'm so uneducated that I can't tell the difference. To this day, I can't think about you without thinking about him. And I started using that as my power greater than myself, the spirit of AA. And for the first time in my life, when I would pray, it wasn't just going out into the air. I had a connection. And man, remarkable things began to happen. Not magical, not mystical, but I didn't feel like a stranger in this thing called life. I felt like I had a chance. I felt good enough to talk to new people. I felt like for the first time in my life, I had something to offer besides, can you give me this? When I started serving the thing that I wanted so much from, which was you, my life began to shift. And I have no regrets. Thank you so much, Glenn.